Let's start kind of at the beginning. Ed Miliband profile. His name has popped up quite a bit of late. Why are we so obsessed with him?
Well, there's a very good question. I'd love to throw it out to the listeners as well. That we're all suffering from Miliband derangement syndrome, I think, to borrow a phrase. Ed has become this lightning rod for everything that people arguably dislike about some of the government's policies, but for a certain section of the country, he's also a bit of a hero. And I think that Andy Burnham now has an extremely difficult decision to make about whether he makes him his Chancellor of the Exchequer. Just to go back a few months, Ed Miliband said to Keir Starmer and the NEC, which is Labour's ruling body, that Andy Burnham should have been allowed to stand in Denton and Gorton, which was the other Greater Manchester by-election that we had this year. You'll remember, and listeners remember, that was blocked by the NEC and ergo.
The removal vans are already outside Downing Street, and Andy Burnham has not even picked his new curtains yet, but he is already facing the toughest decision of his premiership. Not Ukraine, not the economy, Ed Miliband. Yes, the bacon sandwich bloke might be about to become Chancellor of the Exchequer, and Westminster is losing its collective mind. Quick favour before we get into it. If you are enjoying this, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell. Over 92% of you watching right now have not subscribed yet. It costs nothing, takes 2 seconds, and it means the world to this channel.
Go back a few months, Ed Miliband said to Keir Starmer and the NEC, which is Labour's ruling body, that Andy Burnham should have been allowed to stand in Denton and Gorton, which was the other Greater Manchester by-election that we had this year. You'll remember, and listeners remember, that was blocked by the NEC and ergo Keir Starmer. We now know what happened. There was another by-election. They didn't block him, and he's now about to take over as Prime Minister. That is Andy Burnham. But Andy will not have forgotten that debt he owes to Ed from 6 months ago. Ed has also been up there on the campaign trail in Makerfield, and the pair have been in constant communication. He's also a former Treasury official. He's worked with Gordon Brown, and he's one of the more experienced cabinet ministers that we have, and bluntly, he wants the job. The problem that Andy Burnham has got, as Lara Spirit reported last week, is that there are many vested interests who don't want Ed Miliband. Two of them are major unions, the GMB and Unite, who don't like his net zero agenda. There's also the city, which feels that he will be declare war on so-called predator capitalism. And then there's just the general public, which rejected him as a potential prime minister in 2015 and hasn't forgotten that, and would possibly object to him now running the economy. So that's the debit side for Andy Burnham. A lot of baggage. On the credit side, there have been people who've said this week that Miliband gets things done. He's energetic, he knows his way around Whitehall, and he's got a point to prove, and could actually be very helpful for Burnham in actually teaching him the wiles of government, which he's been out of for, since 2010.
So here is the situation. Keir Starmer has departed, Andy Burnham is stepping up, and everybody in Westminster is asking the same question. What on earth does he do with Ed Miliband? Because Miliband is not just any minister, he is Marmite in a suit. Half the country sees him as a hero of the climate fight. The other half still remembers him struggling to eat that sandwich in 2015 like it happened yesterday. But here is the twist. Miliband actually backed Burnham early. He supported him in the Denton and Gorton by-election, a move Starmer and the party machine reportedly blocked, and he turned up campaigning alongside Burnham in Makerfield. That is not nothing. That is political loyalty in an era where loyalty is rarer than a sunny bank holiday.
But either way, I think it's a really, really tricky position for Burnham. Josh Glancy is looking at the story of Ed Miliband, his rise the famous leadership election where he obviously stood against his brother, his time as leader of the opposition, and also who has influenced his thinking. Famously, his father was a left-wing academic. That's been well-trodden ground in the past. But also the other people around him that have influenced his economic and his environmental thinking, which have led him to where he is today. It's completely fascinating. And I think whatever happens with the Chancellorship, he will play a major role in this government. There's speculation that he could be Deputy Prime Minister or stay in his current brief and keep pushing that agenda through. But he's become, because we've arrived at this in such a funny way, that Burnham is essentially anointed Prime Minister without actually a shadow cabinet behind him. We're in a very odd situation.
Okay, it is odd, and there's something to be said about Andy Burnham coming in on this mandate of change. Well, not even a mandate, but kind of the conversations of being such difference and such change for the party, and then bringing in kind of an old guard.
Well, quite. And on Monday, he will be making, as the Times has flashed this morning, a speech on the economy.
Yeah.
But he'll be making a speech on the economy as it stands, without having a Chancellor in place. So who is speaking on Monday? Is it Andy Burnham?
Yeah.
Obviously, he'll be mouthing the words, but whose philosophy is he actually expounding? Is it Ed Miliband's?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. And speaking of all the Labour manoeuvrings, Lara Spirit's been speaking to Yvette Cooper to get her verdict on these 2 years of Starmer.
Yeah, and I think this is really interesting. She's been to Poland with the Foreign Secretary. Now, she's a woman that also has eyes on being Chancellor.
Yeah.
She's a former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, so she's eminently qualified. And we were talking about, there is a problem with Starmer demoting Rachel Reeves to a less prestigious role in the cabinet. Reeves, has been there for nearly 2 years. She's well known by the city, but she is the first woman Chancellor. She has reminded us on occasionally. And losing a woman from a top job when you have another man taking over as Prime Minister may not bother many of the public, but it's excruciating for the Labour Party. Absolutely excruciating. So I think Cooper still has an outside chance of being Chancellor. It's very outside. However, she has spoken to Lara, not just about the Andy Burnham, but also about the last 2 years. And I think what I took from my brief conversation with Lara last night is that she still thinks that the winter fuel moment was the moment where they fell off the, they fell off the tracks and started to lose the public support that they'd built up during the election campaign.
Okay, and aside from politics, I believe.
Now let us talk credentials, because Miliband is no rookie. Former Treasury official, cut his teeth under Gordon Brown, and widely seen as one of Labour's sharpest operators. For a Prime Minister who has not sat in government since 2010, having Miliband beside him is like handing a new driver, a co-pilot who actually knows where the brakes are. So why the hesitation? 3 words: unions, city, baggage. The GMB and Unite are distinctly unimpressed with his relentless net zero agenda. The city is nervous he will come out swinging against what critics call predator capitalism. And then there is the ghost of 2015, still haunting the corridors of Westminster like an uninvited guest who will not take the hint and leave.
Meanwhile, do not sleep on Yvette Cooper, who many insiders still fancy for the Chancellor role herself. And let us not forget the mess Burnham inherits, including the winter fuel payment fiasco that still stings pensioners today. Of course, politics is not the only thing gripping Britain right now. Alanis Morissette has just been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and pilgrimage walking across Britain is having a proper renaissance. Proof that even amid political fatigue, the nation still finds time for a bit of music and a long countryside stroll. So, will Burnham gamble on Miliband or play it safe? One thing is certain, British politics has never been short on drama. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one.